And our next facilitator is Robin Shoemaker. Robin is from the National Institute of Food and Agriculture within the USDA. Robin?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. I think this is a tremendous exercise, incredibly important. You know, thinking about the agenda, thinking about the research that needs to be done is just an incredibly valuable thing. The important thing here is that we're not just thinking about what's of interest to us as economists, but we're thinking about the issues that are important, period. As Jill made a point in a recent blog, is that applied economists have always historically been critical and extremely valuable in identifying the important issues to society and developing methods and techniques and approaches and solutions to understanding those problems. And that's something that we really excel at as a profession. We're also the social scientists, the system thinkers, the big thinkers. We kind of have and understand how things fit together, or at least we know how to ask, you know, what are those components and how do they interact, this sort of thing. So those are the kind of issues I think we'll be dealing with in this process. I don't know, would the presidents come up and what we wanted to do is I wanted to say as little as that, just I think that's very important. We really wanted to get and allow as much time as possible to get a lot of questions, a lot more understanding, and just see how this thing goes. This is a work in process, and we really want your input. But before I introduce them, take a note. Rarely do you get an opportunity to see time. Here's the past, present, and future. You know, it's one of those weird concepts. You know, so here it is. Now you know. So there's Jayson Lusk is from Oklahoma State. He's the current president.
As of yesterday.
As of yesterday. Still warm.
Yeah.
Scott Swinton from Michigan State is the outgoing. No,
incoming.
Current incoming, and Jill McCluskey is the outgoing. Washington State. Nice job, Jill. So with that, let me open it up and start taking questions. We've got, what, about 15, 20 minutes to...
Yep.
So I'll throw something
Mary?
out, although I don't have the list in front of me, but a couple of times when I've looked at the list, I've asked myself, and James for that matter, you know, agriculture doesn't jump out at you, that list, if you're not, I think it does to us, but to a lot of our stakeholders, they're going to see more focus on food and efficient. In a sense, agricultural output is an input into society. You know, we all have to eat. But I've asked myself about that. You know, is this appealing enough? Does it communicate to some important stakeholders? Any thoughts? Has anybody else had that reaction?
Are you passing that? Or?
Yes.
One of the things, so I was not directly involved in the process, and so I maybe look at it with fresher eyes. And but one of the things that really struck me is the process asked people in the profession to think about what should be priorities, and yet we have choices about what to do with our priorities. Some of the things we can control internally. We can control internally what we choose to teach our students, and as we reflect on what they need, we may change what, you know, Keith Coble just talked about what big data may mean for ways that we educate our students. But some things we need to look externally, and you know, we may look for changed funding. In fact, you know, I think Karen's original interest was partly inspired by the success of the Soil Science Society of America with their Soil Health Initiative, the Ecological Society of America with their National Ecological Observatory Network. These have attracted substantial funding for those societies. By casting the priorities that were identified internally in ways that were of, you know, that they could be marketed more broadly, it strikes me that so Mary, your question kind of hooks to something that I've been thinking about this stage in the development of these priorities, which is that we need to make some choices about the difference between what we think is internally valuable and we'd like to use to change our own behavior versus what we think is our ideas, our priorities more broadly for society at large, for the United States, for the planet, and then how we can pitch what economists can contribute to those. So basically, I think we kind of have to take the agricultural and applied part, which is the broader stuff, and the economics part, which is, you know, our disciplinary part, and really be very careful about thinking audience. Who's the audience, and then how do we take these messages and address them to audiences? So some of it, I think, is going to mean getting much more specific about, you know, not just climate change writ large, but what climate change can mean for American crop farmers.
And what economists do.
Precisely.
Yeah.
What, how economists can contribute to thinking rigorously about mitigation and adaptation.
Yeah, so I agree that that's a good point. We need to, it really comes down to communication, you know, because I see production agriculture in so many of these things, you know, in the food, energy, water nexus that is part of natural resource sustainability, in the agricultural innovation part, in the climate change part. But we do need to make sure that we communicate this in a way that excites many different groups. So that's something that we're working on at this point, and that's a great message for us to receive, and we need to do a better job of communicating that.
If you could just stand up when you ask your question so everyone can hear you, because we don't have a roaming mic.
And you can also direct your questions. Some of the presenters is just we just had. And there's 4 others that haven't presented, but this is a broad set of topics. Well, if I could follow up on your comment, Jill, about communication. I think communication is absolutely just critical and fundamental to this whole process. And communication, by definition, is a two-way thing. It's just not, you know, espousing something. It's actually engaging people in the public. And I think that's an important part of this process that we need to really begin to develop. So we are on the right mark. So we're addressing the right issues. I mean, have we thought about that, or is it any other comments on it? Sure.
Well, I was also thinking that I think that often the audiences that we're trying to communicate to don't really understand what we do.
Right.
And so as part of that, the introduction to the priorities and solutions will include something that Jayson Lusk wrote a first draft of. What do agricultural and applied economists do? And we're getting feedback on that right now, and that was not included in this. So I think that will also help on the communication side. And then we do need feedback from people who communicate outside as their main professional endeavor. You know, so I think that will help also.
Yeah, I just thought I'd weigh in and say, you know, when I think about what we're trying to do here, there's a lot of different objectives trying to be accomplished with one thing. That's okay. That's one of the challenges, I think. But for me, one of the important things here is this is an opportunity for us to define for others, and even perhaps for ourselves, who we are. That's kind of hard to do. But I think that's a real opportunity. And I get that question a lot dealing with media. The question will come something like, wow, I didn't know there was such a thing as an agricultural economist. And that's so strange for someone that spends their waking hours thinking about these issues all the time. But most people don't have anything know what we do or who we are. Or I've even had the question that Jill even phrased, which is, what is an ag and applied economist? And so I think our ability to answer that in some coherent way is really important. And I see this as an attempt to try to be able to do that. And how we describe ourselves to each other might be a little different than how we describe ourselves to somebody who may not know something about us. And so, we could have some internal and external discussions. And so, yeah, but one of the challenges too is we have a really broad profession, and I think that's great. It makes us diverse, it makes us adaptable, it makes it hard to describe to other people what we do.
Might be easier to say, well,